Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good morning, I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, this has been some week for the Catholic Church and for all, Catholic with a small c as well, meaning universal, because we all celebrate this moment when people are so ecstatic about the selection of a leader. You saw the crowds in St. Peter's Square, the reaction from people around the world, so we all came together. And who better to talk about it with us today than Father Ryan Muldoon, Director of Ecumenical and Interreligious Dialogue for the Archdiocese of New York. Good morning, Father Muldoon.
Rabbi Potasnik, Reverend Bernard, great to be back with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Always good to have you on the program. Rabbi, you're going to start us off
Yeah,
here?
I was looking at the screen and the announcer said, or whoever was the host there said, and we have a new pope. And all of a sudden, Father Muldoon comes on the screen. I said, oh, my God, we got the youngest pope in the history of the church. But it was wonderful listening to you then and having you now. Tell me what it means for you and what do you think it means for others since you're involved with interreligious dialogue?
Well, I noted that when Pope Leo came out for that very first time on the balcony on the loggia, he talked about being bridge builders. One of the ways we call the Pope in Latin is the pontifex, which literally means a bridge. And he called us to be bridges to one another. He used the term bridges through dialogue, through encounter. And so in a brief but very beautiful statement where he talked about peace, he used this image of being bridge builders. And I think that sets the tone for his papacy ahead, that he saw himself and sees himself not just as the leader of the worldwide Catholic Church, but he wants to be a leader to all people. He kept emphasizing this image of the bridge, but talking about all people.
You can't protect them unless you connect with them, right? You got to be connected, and I think that's an important message. In selecting a pope, what do you see as the criteria?
Well, Rabbi, there's lots of things we could point to, and that's what the cardinals were gathered for more than a week to talk about in Rome before they entered the conclave. But I think one of the things that certainly seems to have been on the mind of the cardinals was that it be a global man, someone who is well versed in the needs of not just Catholics in one part of the world, but in the worldwide Catholic Church and for people from all places on the earth. And we see that in Cardinal Prevost, now Pope Leo. He, of course, very notably, is the first American pope, but he's not just an American. When we're recording this, we're only just a few hours after the election, but by my rough calculation, he has spent about 33 years outside the U.S. And about another 36 in the U.S. So he's from America. He's spent plenty of time in the U.S., but he was a bishop in Peru, very close to his people there. He even gave a shout out to them in Spanish from the loggia as he was introduced to the world. He spent a number of years in Rome, first as the worldwide head of his religious order that he's a part of, the Augustinians, and then for these last few years, after being called by Pope Francis and made a cardinal, he occupied a very prominent post within the Vatican, where he was responsible for helping with the nominations of bishops around the world. So he's a global man, certainly from the States, but has this vast experience in Latin America, understands Rome and the dynamics of the church. And I think that was something that would have been central on the minds of the cardinal electors.
Father, the reality is that this could have profound religious, social, and political implications because the papacy has traditionally been associated with European, particularly Italian leadership. So an American pope could signify a shift in ecclesiastical influence from Europe to the global Northwest, especially the United States. Will this stir some of the traditionalist factions who view American culture as, we're individualistic, consumerist, and theologically liberal? Do you think that's going to be some of the reaction to this pope?
I think time will tell, Reverend Bernard, but I think you're asking the question that a lot of folks are asking themselves in these days. And I think that Pope Leo is going to have to fight to show that he's not just an American. We know that his biography proves that, but he's going to have to prove that now as Pope. We noticed that he didn't say anything in English, and I don't think we need to read too much into that, but just to say, maybe he's taking into account that he doesn't want to be perceived as just an American. He'll tell us more in these days, and he may have told us by the time your listeners hear this about his selection of a name. But his selection of the name of Pope Leo, at least to my mind, calls to mind the last Pope Leo, the 13th, who was known as sort of a pope around social issues. He fought deeply for the rights of workers and the dignity of labor. And so we'll have to see if some of that was part of why he chose the name of Leo and whether or not those are priorities that he brings to his pontificate.
Father Muldoon, you're very involved in interreligious dialogue, and we've been privileged to sit at the table with you. We mean Reverend Bernard and other faith leaders. And I can tell you over the years, I've met many religious leaders. Not everyone makes interfaith a priority. It's there, but it's not a priority. Cardinal Dolan has made it a priority. Do you see interfaith communication being a priority? Is it too early to tell? I don't see how you can be a global leader without including others in the conversation of different faiths.
I see reasons for hope, Rabbi. I see, first and foremost, the fact that in those brief remarks from the Loggia after being introduced, the Pope spoke about dialogue. And that, to me, is a great sign of hope that ecumenical and interreligious dialogue will be a priority in his pontificate. I think we also have to look at who he is succeeding. And we know that dialogue was a key commitment of Pope Francis. Cardinal Prevost, before he became Pope, he was called to be a bishop by Pope Francis, and then he was appointed as a cardinal by Pope Francis, called to work in a key Vatican position by Pope Francis. And so we expect that he'll have some of those same chief concerns of his predecessor, Pope Francis, and dialogue was certainly among the chief concerns of the late Pope, and we hope that it will be for Pope Leo as well.
When religious history is written, we need to make sure that it doesn't stop in the Middle Ages, because if you look back in the Middle Ages, relationships with other communities, I think of the Jewish community, then the Catholic community, was not a good one. But it evolved. It became a great one. Today, the relationship we share, we can have open discussion. We can disagree with each other without destroying the relationship. We've come a long way, and it's very important that people know that we're at a different point in time. And that's why I say the Pope being elected is a moment for all of us, because we know we're going to be at the table at some point.
Right. I think that...
Go ahead, please.
Just to say that Pope Leo, being a member of a religious community, the Augustinians, they have a rich tradition. We think of St. Augustine, for whom they're named, who lived and died he lived in the late 300s and died in the early 400s. He realizes that he's a sort of modern instantiation of a long religious tradition, and I hope that he's the Pope we need for these times.
Not on political level. There are between 53 and 60 million Catholics here in America. I don't know if you have exact numbers, but I think it's about 24% of the American population. And back in 1960, with the election of John Kennedy, the first Catholic president of the United States, there were concerns about the influence of the Vatican on his policies, his positions, his domestic policies, and his foreign policies. With that many voting, 53 million adults who identify as Catholic, that many individuals, voting population in America, Are there concerns about, the influence that he would wield in American politics? And I know it's early, so we're speculating here.
Yeah. Again, Reverend Bernard, I think you're giving voice to a question that's on the minds and hearts of a lot of folks, and that kind of goes back to my pointing to Pope Leo as a global man, as a global religious leader. I think he'll have to fight that uphill battle of showing that he's not just American. But there might be some way in which he touches the minds and hearts of American Catholics in a way that another pope might not have.
We're going to take a break. We got to take a break, Rev.
Okay, let me come back.
When we
All
come
right.
back, we'll listen to the next question. Thanks.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network. If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.
This episode is brought to you by Cadillac. When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the Cadillac Certified Service Fresh Start Tire event. Visit Cadillac.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating U.S. GM dealers only. Highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends 5/31/2025. Not available with other offers.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And we are continuing our conversation with Father Ryan Muldoon, Director of Ecumenical and Interreligious Dialogue for the Archdiocese of New York. Rev?
So, Father, before the break, I was going to ask you a question about the Global South, because Catholicism, Christianity as a whole, is most rapidly growing in Africa, Asia, and, of course, Latin America. Do you think, first of all, what's the relationship with this Pope with the Global South? There is, of course, a disconnect between the American Church and the Global South. Do you think that he can bring reconciliation and solidarity? 2 questions for you.
Yeah, Reverend Bernard, I certainly think that your pointing to the Global South is key to understanding the man that we're going to get to know as Pope Leo. He spent some 20 years in Peru, and so he knows that reality of the church growing and flourishing there. From my vantage point, one of the things that is frequently on my mind is the dearth of priestly vocations that we experience in the United States and in some traditionally Christian and Catholic countries, including in Europe. And certainly we think of how vocations are flourishing in those places that you just mentioned and would have been flourishing in Peru. I believe that part of then Father Prevost's biography is that while he was in Peru, he was for about a decade involved in seminary formation. And so that will be an interesting piece to begin to understand about how he was involved, his experience in recruiting and training young men for the priesthood in a place where I imagine they would have been bursting at the seams, whereas today we're quite concerned in our own context for the lack of the number of vocations.
Father, one of the things we've learned about prediction is that people shouldn't predict. Right? Prophets had some ability to do that. We don't. And the predictions that were being made, oh my God, this is going to take a week to find out who the new pope is. It's certainly not going to be an American. Everyone who made these predictions was wrong. And by the way, the selection of the pope, the decision was determined in less time than in ranked choice voting that we're going to have here in New York. So maybe it's a lesson for people. Just let it play out and stop trying to oversee the process. There are people in that room who know what they're doing, who have tremendous resumes. They're capable of selecting a leader. And I think we ought to stop this business. We have more important things to focus on than predicting who the next pope is going to be.
I agree. And I think we have to have some sympathy for the cardinals and for this man now elected a pope. I was thinking in these days about how most of the men potentially elected from the College of Cardinals are in their 70s. Pope Leo is 69. These are men who are at an age where they're getting ready for retirement, and as much as a priest is ever retired, maybe giving up a bit of the administrative duties and returning to pastoral work. Here he is at 69 years old, beginning this whole new project, this whole new mission as the global leader of the Catholic community, as the voice of the Catholic Church to the world. My goodness, what a weight has been laid upon his shoulders.
When I walked into the studio today, our producer, Rich Redabali, said something to me, and Rich is a very proud Catholic. He said, I think people are yearning for understanding what is the mission of the church. And I think the same thing is true of all of our faith communities. People want to know, what does my tradition say to me about a number of things? But I want to know the essence of my tradition. And I find there are some people who talk it's about, but not the it. They don't go to the core. They go to, the extraneous areas. And I think it's important that people understand we do have a core mission. We have very, very fundamental tenets of our faith, and we want to preserve those tenets, but people have to know what they are.
Indeed, and I think he tried to boil down in those brief comments on the balcony a message that is applicable to all people, no matter where they are, where they were hearing it, in what stage of life. It was a message of peace. He talked about peace in one's heart, peace in the family, peace for all people. He talked about a peace that is humble, a peace that is disarming, a word that I think was probably very intentionally chosen as we think about the Pope's role. Certainly Pope Francis took this seriously, and I think Pope Leo will as well, the role of the Pope in bringing about peace in those war-torn areas of our globe. And so what was his message as he stood there being introduced to the world? It was one of peace, one that spoke to people no matter where they were physically or where they were in their journey of life.
Yeah, even in my faith, I tend to be a pragmatist, Father. So I think about, the fact that he is going to be challenged with the needing to transcend national identity in order to be effective in his new role. Because an American pope would be historically, now it's happened, historically unprecedented and deeply symbolic. And he inherits a papacy that's both spiritual and geopolitical. That's real. So he's going to have to walk a fine line between American cultural influence, because he's a Republican, right? In terms of his political affiliation here in the United States, Rabbi. I think you mentioned that.
They did some background checking on his voting record. Yeah, he was a registered Democrat in Chicago.
It took them about 5 minutes to go.
So he's going to have to walk a fine line between American cultural influence and the universal mission of the church. So as you bring up the mission and understanding what that mission, he's going to really have to get that across to the public. He's going to need our prayers. There's no doubt about this.
Indeed. Somebody, I was watching some of the coverage right after he was elected, and somebody said in jest, well, they weren't likely to choose an American, but he was the least American of the Americans. That's a funny comment, but there might be some truth to it. And I think he really is a global man, and he'll try to show that side of himself as he fights against some of those preconceptions about him that might come as a result of his nationality. One thing we should find out too, I heard along the way that he may have also become a Peruvian citizen in his years there. I'm not totally sure about that, but something to find out as well.
That's interesting. But maybe we're seeing a prophetic progression here, because it begins with the first South American Pope, right, from Argentina. And now we've gone up north to the Northwest America. Maybe there's a prophetic progression here. I don't know what it's leading to, but Rabbi said, do not try to predict the future. So I'll behave myself.
Yeah.
One thing that we should note about him is that he is trained as a canon lawyer. He's trained as a church lawyer. I point that out also because we share an alma mater. He studied at a university in Rome where I also studied. I studied ecumenism and interreligious dialogue, but he studied church law. And so we'll have to see how that side of him comes through as Pope, that he'll perhaps bring a sort of legal mind, a sort of framework, a way of seeing life, seeing the church that might be different just because of his background.
We are blessed in New York to have His Eminence Timothy Cardinal Dolan, who has inspired people with his message of hope and also message of humor. And I think it says to all of us as faith leaders, we need you. You have influence, and you can be impactful on the lives of people. And I think all of us, as a result of this election, have to look within again and saying, what more can we do to be that positive influence in the lives of people?
Amen. Do you want to come and preach for me on Sunday, Rabbi?
I have to speak. I have to speak
Rabbi.
at St. Pat's. I just, I can't get over to that. But really, that's why it was exhilarating for all of us. My God, look at the attention being given to this man of great faith. Look how much people want him to succeed. And I think all of us have to go back and say, people want hope. Thank you so much. Father Ryan Muldoon.
Yeah, you're in our prayers, Father, because I'm sure you're going to be called upon to have these conversations.
And Rev, I want to make one prediction, even I said don't predict. One day, Ryan Muldoon. Keep that name in your head and in your heart. Don't be surprised if there's another American in the background.
You never know.
Right.
You never know.
Good to be with you, Paul. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Father. And thank you. We'll be right back with more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Red Apple Radio Networks.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original, which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
Jif peanut butter. It's that jiffing good, it doesn't really need advertising. So instead, enjoy the calming sounds of the ocean. Jif. Ooh, it's that jiffing good. Get your Jif at Jif.com.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Tassi.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, one of the things I think people need to hear from us, and a word that needs to be stated over and over again, is the word no. We need boundaries. I think there are too many places where people say anything goes, you can do or say whatever you want. There are no boundaries. And that's why 7 out of the 10 commandments are in the negative. But as leaders, we have to be able to say, this is unacceptable. And that can be applied to so many different situations of life.
Rabbi, that is what has protected me over the years. I have certain moral boundaries that I won't cross, nor will I allow others to cross. And it has really saved me from a lot of heartache and a lot of pain. You're right. Can you imagine if we removed all of the white and yellow lines in the roads and just left them as they are? Can you imagine the chaos?
Yeah.
And then people would realize maybe we need some boundaries, you know?
Isn't that why Passover is followed by Pentecost, or as we call Shavuot, with the giving of the Torah? That it wasn't enough to be free. It had to be freedom that was also bound by certain restrictions. You couldn't do whatever you want. Otherwise, you're going to have, what we call anomie, or you said chaos. And I think today, too many people have these, it's what's good for me. I don't care about you. The heck with you. It's what's good for me. And that contravenes religious tradition.
I heard it said that the greatest threat to freedom is freedom. And that is so true. Even freedom, you have to have boundaries in order to maintain that freedom. We, explain this when we do financial seminars, and the importance of having discipline. Because if you're under a load of debt and you get freed from that, if you don't put boundaries on spending, boundaries on investing, boundaries on how you handle your money, you're going to go right back into debt again, and you're going to be financially bound. So I think everything, in order to maintain liberty, freedom, we need boundaries.
Let's carry that over to what happened at Columbia University. Some 80 students went in, assaulted some of the people there, attacked them, physically attacked them. Indulged in disrupting those who were studying in the Butler Library, said some ugly things, no boundaries. And as a result of what they did, I hope that Columbia is going to be very, very punitive. There have to be consequences for that kind of behavior. A reporter said to me, what do you think? I said, you want prevention? You want to prevent it from happening again? Let there be punishment. Punishment prevents. Because we all know growing up, when we were punished, we thought, we're not going there again. We don't want to do it again. And there have to be some serious, serious ramifications when you think you can just do whatever you want when there are no boundaries.
Yeah, look, these are, again, our protests over the Israel-Gaza conflict, and, pro-Palestinian student groups organize and decide that they want to express themselves in a way. And interesting thing is that they are doing it without boundaries. And they're protesting because there needs to be boundaries in terms of how we go through a peace process. It's quite interesting. Right. But, it's reminiscent of the 60s. I grew up in the 60s, and there was every type of protest imaginable taking place in the 60s against the Vietnam War, against the American government, against things that were happening in local communities. It was amazing, and I don't know, you remember Kent State University, and they actually had to call in troops, right? And it ended up where those troops fired on students, and some died in the process. Yeah, is that America?
Well,
I ask you, Rabbi.
Well, there are protests, and depends how you protest, what you're protesting. The people who are protesting here are not just taking a side in the Palestinian-Israeli. They are siding with Hamas. They are advocating for a terrorist organization that calls for the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. That's what they're saying. So it's not, a simple protest. We take a different side. It's not a peaceful protest. They're going in and making sure that you cannot live the way you want to live. We're going to tell you how to live. And what's interesting is if they were living in Gaza under Hamas, they wouldn't be able to say half the things that they're saying. They wouldn't be able to do most of the things that they're doing. And certainly when you see people who, are gays for Gaza, come on. You would be killed in Gaza if you were gay. So I think we have to be more honest in our discussion here. But above all, let's see if Colombia really comes down hard, because if it doesn't, we're going to see this repeat itself. And by the way, there are kids on waiting lists to get into Colombia. Get these kids out and get those kids in, right?
But we still talk about freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to gather. We need moral boundaries. I think you hit the right word, boundary, because there's a difference between freedom and coercion. Because protest is a moral act when it's grounded in truth-telling and nonviolence and respect for the humanity of others. But when it becomes mass, because remember, some of these individuals were mass, anonymous, destructive, intimidating. It's no longer a moral witness, and I'll emphasize that. It's no longer a moral witness. It becomes a form of coercion. Like you're going to force certain things to happen by virtue of your actions, and that's a problem. It's mob action.
You don't have the freedom to assault me. You have the freedom to voice your position. You don't have the freedom to attack me. And these people, without the boundaries, go in and hurt other people physically. And by the way, when we were going through our final studies, remember the studying for the finals? We were immersed. We didn't go out and protest that week or 2 weeks. We were studying how do these people find time to go out and spend all this effort in disruption? I mean, is that their major in school?
Well, it raises another question, Rabbi. How many of them were actual protesters, and how many of them were paid to be involved in something like this, by other organizations?
Well, we got to find out.
We ask those questions now.
You and I wrote letters to the governor about unmasking, right? Mm-hmm. We said, there are masks that are worn for religious purposes, but in the protest, no masks. No masks. Yeah. You're not the Ku Klux Klan. Right? And even then, there's got to be some way you got to identify who these people are so they can be properly punished. And this is just absurd what has been going on for a while at Columbia and other campuses as well. And often it's because you have weak administrators who don't enforce.
That's another question. Yeah, the university responsibility, because universities are places for free inquiry, but not places for unchecked anarchy. Not at all. And I think leadership must protect both the rights of the protesters, right? Mm-hmm. But also the security of the community. And Columbia is an institution that has to establish some type of, like you said, boundaries when it comes to these things, especially external actors. Because it's more than just students,
I was looking.
There are other individuals who are mixed in the crowd.
I hope people look at University of Washington issued a statement that was so forceful that we will not tolerate assaults. We will not tolerate, and they went through a whole list of things. You have a right to protest, but you don't have the right to do these things. And we will enforce these rules, and there will be punishment if you cross the line. That's the kind of leadership you need. That's what people want to see, and we haven't seen enough of it. Maybe this will send a message. Claire Shipman is the president of Columbia. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, look, as I mentioned, in the 1960s, it was in, I think it was 1968, maybe 69. I think it was 1968, Hamilton Hall. It was occupied by students who were protesting the Vietnam War and racial injustice. And you know who was there? Dr. Martin Luther King. He warned, disorder is not democracy. Mm-hmm. That's what he said. And that's what they were engaging in, disorder.
We always say it, you can protest, and you have a right, and very often you have a responsibility to protest when you feel it's a moral and just cause. Mm-hmm. But you don't have the right to take over a building, to assault employees, to put all kinds of hate material all around and disrupt people from studying, you don't have that right. And when you do those things, just know there's going to be a tomorrow, and you will no longer be a student at Columbia University. It was a privilege for you to be here. You vitiated that privilege with your kind of behavior, and now you're out. Now go find a job now.
So, Rabbi, we are men of the cloth. Give me a theological reflection on boundaries as it appears in Scripture, in your tradition.
Well,
what does the Scripture say?
It's interesting. You have to put a fence, for example, on the roof of the building. You got to have a guardrail because someone could fall off. And you learn from that, you got to have boundaries. As a matter of fact, if you look at the portion talking about holiness, it says establish boundaries so people don't trample on the rights of others. So to me, that was, look, when the story of creation, Adam and Eve, God says, thou shalt,
there you go.
Right? Thou shalt not, right? We got a boundary here. You have this unlimited credit card. You can do whatever you want. It's the Garden of Eden, but there's a boundary. And they couldn't even follow that rule.
That's the human. And think a little bit. I'm glad you mentioned creation, because think about the boundaries that God set between light and darkness, between sea and land, day and night. These are all boundaries, And I think it's important that we understand that we cannot experience human flourishing in chaos.
We're going to take a break, Rev.
Absolutely. All right, yeah. So we'll be back with more conversation right here on the Rev and the Rabbi on Red Apple Radio Networks.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
The Rev and the Rabbi on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, let me tell you an interesting experience I had this past week. I was asked to participate in a conversion, someone converting to the Jewish faith. And before the actual conversion, there's immersion into a body of water. You have to have a conversation. You have to ask some questions. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this of your own free will? And one of the things that came across from this particular candidate, and I've heard this before, I'm doing this because I love the religion, I love the community, and I want to be part of it. And I said to this individual, I want to thank you for saying what you said today, because we spend a lot of time on anti-Semitism. We talk audits on anti-Semitism, all the studies and all the results of the studies, and you're here not because of anti-Semitism. I've never heard anyone who decided to become a member of a faith, I'm here because I want to fight anti-Semitism. And I remember years ago, my dad said to me, and he was a survivor of the Holocaust, you didn't become a rabbi just to fight anti-Semitism. And I think that love for faith And we see that with the election of the Pope. People celebrating their faith, this glorious moment. That's what needs to be prioritized. We can fight the anti-Semitism, but if we don't have the love for community, if we don't have the love for our faith, then it's going to be short-lived in terms of the commitment.
I think it's important what you're talking about, love for community, love our faith and family and context, et cetera, because Pew Research did a study of the trends of religious conversion. And many of the conversions are not into another religion, but in where people have given up on religion. So it's interesting that here you are witnessing such a thing, a conversion to Judaism. May I ask, conversion from what to Judaism?
You know, I asked the why. Why, you know, why Judaism? What is it about Judaism? You know, and by the way, whenever someone comes to me and says, I want to convert to another faith, I always tell them, not often, you have a responsibility to look at your own faith. I want to know why you're not being more embracing of your own faith. Why are you looking to go to another faith? Have you spoken to the minister? Have you really done a deep dive into your own tradition? Because before you reject something, know what it is you're rejecting. So, you know, I think it's important to find the why, and hopefully it's rooted, you know, in sincere motives. But it's always good when people say, I love this faith. I wish we had more. I wish we had more. You know, I often say, we often used to say in our group and with Jews, casual Jews become Jewish casualties because, if you take it casually, if there's no commitment. I'll give you an example, Rev. We get emails, and I have few people, I get emails from them, that goes into spam, and they say to me, why didn't you criticize Rabbi so-and-so for what he said recently? And why didn't you criticize this person for what he said recently? And I said, you know, it's fair to ask that, but I want to know one thing before I answer. Where are you a member? What congregation? What institution do you support? And I said, if the answer is no to that, you don't have to respond. I'm still waiting for an answer. I'm waiting for it because these people are just critics all the time. They're always looking for the, you know, what can I fight against? Not what can I fight for? What can I fight against? That's not good enough to be. You know,
I think when we ask the why, which is a good question, you know, cultural and societal shifts, you know, modern values, Rabbi, values have changed to the values that we subscribe to and we grew up on, you know, so when you have societal changes, they influence individuals to reassess their religious affiliations. They begin to rethink, why am I, because, you know, you're usually born into some faith, right? And at one time, you died. Whatever faith you were born into, you died. The idea of switching faith was absolutely anathema, you know. But now, in the modern world, you know, things have changed. Personal beliefs are in conflict with the teachings of church of you know, religious doctrine. So people become disaffiliated. I'm trying to remember some of the report from Pew Research. Oh, interfaith marriages also. Marriages between individuals of different faiths. That is happening a lot now. And, you know, people are switching because it's difficult to raise a child in two different faiths. It doesn't always work.
There was a program on TV years ago when Bridget Loves Bernie. It was all about an interfaith marriage. And there were people who said, we got to get it off the air because it's promoting intermarriage. And they would protest. And guess what happened? Finally, it went off the air. And, you know, the intermarriage rate didn't go down.
It went up.
Right? Right? I mean, here you thought, oh, is this TV program? If we only get rid of the TV program, we won't have the intermarriage. And
I think our young people educationally, as they go into college, they go into higher education, you know, they're exposed to diverse beliefs, and it can cause you to rethink and explore different kinds of faith and adopt new values. I remember that's what the 60s was about. People were re-exploring, you know, faith and the faith dimension of things. And, you know, a lot of Eastern philosophy and Eastern religions flooded into the United States and music to go with it. It was a very, very interesting time back in the 60s. And here we are, you know, 2 generations later, and it's happening again.
Yeah. But I think part of it is because people are not fully involved in their own faith tradition, again, they don't really appreciate what their tradition says, and then when you don't have something that is your anchor, you start looking for something else. You drift away.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And isn't that typical of people though? When you don't appreciate what you have, that's when you'll start looking for something else. And you're right. Many people grow up in the faith and become cultural Jews, cultural Christians, you know what I mean? Cultural Muslims, but they really don't know their belief systems. And they go looking elsewhere, not realizing that these values were present in the faith that they were already in.
I was at a meeting recently, and we went around the room. People were asked to identify their faith. And one person stands up and says, "I'm a secular Jew," taking great pride in that. And for me, it was a painful moment to hear it. What does it mean I'm a secular Jew? My religion means nothing to me. It's secularism that is everything to me. I'm trying to be a hybrid. I don't know what it means, but I think also we lost this person somewhere along the way, that a person is proud of, I'm a secular Jew. I'm not a religious Jew. We didn't get this person motivated as we should have. Somewhere along something happened, whether it was at home or, a bad experience elsewhere. But we need to be the exemplars of the beauty of our faith traditions. That's why when I've been to your church, Rev, people who come there are excited in being there. They're not just there because I have to go. They want to go. And I think that's a great statement of what you've been able to do over the years.
Rabbi, I will tell you, instead of just trying to maintain a tradition, we live in a consciousness and do ministry in a consciousness of people's self-awareness, the existential nature of humanity. People are asking the questions, why am I here? What is my role in the world? Does my life, have value beyond survival? They're looking for meaning and purpose. And if we don't associate that with their faith, with our faith, right? Our faith tradition, then they'll look elsewhere.
Yeah.
So we have a responsibility to dive into life's questions, the big questions, and bring answers, clear answers, not just, because this is the way we've been doing it for the last 2,000 years. No, why have we been doing it this way? What does it mean?
The good news, if there is in that, is that people who have pursued the secular world often find it's empty at the end of the day. Is this all it's about? Where's the value of me? Why am I here? Is it just to make a living? Is it just to work? So I think secularism has limited appeal. But we've discussed a lot today, and I have to say it's been a great week for Catholics. It's a great week for us when we can all stand together and say, enjoy this moment, and we enjoy it with you because it's a celebration of religious tradition, and we are all proud of our religious tradition.
Absolutely, and that's the way we should be. Yeah. And that's exciting. Especially, I'm looking forward to your conversion. I've been working on you for about 20 years now.
You are going to get you're going to get like an easy pass to the next world. I mean, that's going to get you there. We kid about that, but in all the times we've been together, and there have been many, in different settings, we always talk about respect for the other, respect for our own. It's not about trying to change the other. It's about trying to appreciate the other and also appreciate what we have. So
absolutely,
you can be there for others and with others, but don't forget about being there with your own as well.
Yeah,
Thank you, Rev.
That's great. Yeah, been wonderful conversation, and we hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Red Apple Radio Networks. Until next time, God bless.
If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor, or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com.